This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Well, hello and welcome to a very special Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Joe Rimmer and we are on location at Lovelock's coffee shop in the centre of Liverpool. It's just down Dale Street and we've made our way out the office today for a special Blood Red pod. And I'm joined by three special guests. Paul Gorst, how are we, Paul?
Yeah, all good. Glad to be
out
on
and about.
Location. Yeah, it makes a difference in not seeing your little face on a StreamYard box. Or packed behind the desk. Someone said we looked like we were doing a job interview the other day. So it's a bit nice, a bit more casual. A bit more relaxed.
We'll have to try the coffee afterwards. If you're listening at home, by the way, and you do hear the noises of coffees being made, people coming in and out, that's just because we're on location. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll obviously see that. But we've got a Liverpool shirt behind us and everything that Theo brought in. How are we, Theo?
Yeah, not too bad. Getting along nicely. It's nice to be out and about, isn't it? Seeing the city in a bit more detail from just our little Hall Street area.
Yeah. And Keifer, MacDonald, how are you?
Yeah, same as the other lads. Really good. Nice to be out. Nice to see the city. Something different. Yeah. Football's nearly back, so can't really complain, can you?
Yeah, looking good. Well, we've got quite a few topics to discuss today, Gorsty. We'll start with... I didn't really know where to start today. There's that many different things floating around. So I thought we'd start with Thiago. I don't think we've really discussed him on the pod yet. But I thought we'd have a little discussion about him in detail. Quite a few reports this week that he's attracting a little bit of interest from Saudi Arabia. Obviously has 1 year left on his contract. It doesn't look like Liverpool are going to renew that. Where do you stand on him? What's the latest on him? And what's your opinion? Would you sell him? Would you keep him? I know you're a big Thiago fan, aren't you?
I mean, the latest is Liverpool are yet to receive any kind of formal proposal from any club in Saudi Arabia. We know that obviously that's a nation that's very, up and coming in terms of what they're looking to do with the Saudi Pro League this season. So many players already got over there, haven't they? So it makes sense that Thiago would be someone they'd look to target. In the final 12 months of his Liverpool contract, he's 32. Maybe one final massive payday for him, but Liverpool yet to receive any official offer and are planning for the season with him in the ranks. I think it was The Athletic reported this week that an official proposal has been put to Thiago's camp directly, but he's planning for the season as a Liverpool player, and to be honest, I think that is wise from the players' perspective and Liverpool certainly. I can see the arguments for it in terms of him being 32 years of age. His wages are around about £200,000 a week. He's injury prone. He's not someone who, I think the most he's played for Liverpool in a season is 25 games. So there are arguments for offloading him for a decent fee and maybe look to reinvest that elsewhere. But I just think he's more valuable to Liverpool for the games that you can put him on the pitch for. Last season, a little bit of an over-reliance on him at times, which inevitably caused him to break down with those injuries. First day at Fulham, he had that hip injury, didn't he, after Christmas, which was the reason he ended up having to go under the knife for surgery last month or in May. So while I can see the arguments for, I just think he's better and more valuable to Liverpool this season in the ranks as a bit of a luxury player, and that's really a compliment in football when you say someone's a luxury player. But I just think if you can manage his minutes, keep him fit, he can be a vital asset for Liverpool this season.
Okay, Keifer, now you're going to have to put to bed maybe a myth here, but a rumour in our office says that you think that Thiago is the best footballer you've ever watched for Liverpool. Is that true?
No, that wasn't what I said. I said it to Theo, actually.
Been misquoted.
I said top five.
Theo misquoted. Yeah, he threw under the bus. That is Theo behaviour.
For context, I'm a 2000s baby, so might not have had some of the luxuries of some of the older figures in the office, but I said top five. And if you take everything away and look at it at face value, not what they've won at Liverpool, but just purely on turning up to Anfield every week and watching a player, Thiago for me is I put him in the same bracket as a Squires, really, just in terms of he's the reason you get into football, isn't he? Just there's no one in the squad who can do what he does, the way he breaks lines, the way he kind of drops the shoulder. I just think he's such a silky footballer. And there's been times when I've been watching Liverpool over the last 3 or 4 years while Thiago's been there, and sometimes he does stuff and you think, I can't actually believe he plays for Liverpool. He's been such a figure in European football over the past 9-10 years since he came through at Barcelona. Obviously then went to Bayern Munich and kind of established himself there as a team that won 9 or 10 Bundesligas in a row. Obviously won the Champions League as well, and you do get that impression that you look at when Liverpool signed him the year after they won or the summer after they won the league. if you're talking about statement signings, I think that's as big as you can get, really, going out. And, as I say, he just won the Champions League weeks early with Bayern Munich. And I just think he's a joy to watch. And I kind of echo what Gorst says in the sense of, I don't think Liverpool have any players like him. And, if you're looking at it on paper, I think this season, you look at Szoboszlai, you look at McAllister coming in, you look at Curtis Jones now getting a run of games. Elliott is a year improved. It almost feels like it could be set up for the perfect season for Thiago in terms of he can be that ultimate luxury player in terms of, Liverpool aren't stretching him to the brink and kind of putting such pressure on his body to kind of play 8-9 games in a row, when I think when it gets to 7 or 8, you're looking and thinking he's going to go here. If you can kind of drop him in for the big games, I mean, the one that sticks out for me during his time here is that game at Anfield against United, that 4-0, April 2022. I mean, the way he just ran the show. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen the highlight reels and the show reels. You just watch that and you think, why would Liverpool, if they were to sell him now at 32 with a year left on his contract, even if he went to Saudi, I would be surprised if they got a meaningful transfer fee for him. I just think, in a year where they've also lost James Milner and a few other kind of, leaders, if you want to call in the dressing room, I'm sure you can place Oxlade-Chamberlain into that as well. I just think the links of Thiago maybe going and people saying Henderson as well. I just think you've got to be careful. A lot of fans will look at it from the front and think, well, they're not playing every week. What value are they? But we know Klopp's obviously a man who looks at the bigger picture and behind the scenes, and that's why James Milner was playing until he was 37. He wasn't starting every week, but he was such a vital kind of figure behind the scenes. And again, I'd put Thiago into that category of someone who's been there, done it, got the trophies. I mean, you only have to look at what Bajcetic said when he was kind of coming through at the start of the year and how complimentary he was. Obviously, they kind of share, a bit of heritage in terms of where they're from. And then above all, I say he's a brilliant footballer. So I've sided with Gorst in this and saying, I would hands off him this summer. Give him let him have another 12 months and then see where he lies there.
Theo, Keifer makes a good point there, because obviously Liverpool have brought 2 midfielders in this summer. There's talk of a third. It would be a big overhaul to perhaps sell one of their more experienced players and add another player in there. But is there an argument that Liverpool don't have many sellable assets? He's on a lot of money. If they're going to free up money now's the time to do it.
Yeah, I can see both sides. Thiago is one of those few players that you could get a decent fee for him now. We've seen, was it Jota from Celtic? He's got 25 million. I know he's a much younger player, but from that lesser league, you'd like to think you're going to get 15-ish for Thiago if he did go, and he's on a big wage. If he's available for a full season, you justify that wage. If he's not, can you afford that luxury? We've been in this situation 12 months ago with Naby Keita. He's just had the season of his life for Liverpool, and you think, oh great, push on. Even if he's going to go at the end of his contract, we get another year out of him. And look what happens. He barely kicks the ball. It's more injuries. It's more frustration. There is the argument that Klopp said before with the likes of Emre Can, Gini Wijnaldum. It costs more to replace them. I'd rather have them in the squad than let them go and have a lesser player there. And make no mistake, Thiago is one of the best midfielders of this generation of footballers. It would be really hard to replace him for a player of equal quality. But when you look at what Liverpool are doing now, it is this long-term planning. It's like they are building their next midfield. They've brought in a 24-year-old, a 22-year-old. Realistically, they're in that starting team. Fabinho's probably completing the trio at the moment, depending how he starts the season. And then it's like, if Thiago's not starting there, what is his role? Personally, I don't see him fitting into the new formation. You don't want him as the sitter alongside Trent. You'd rather have one who's a bit more of an enforcer in there, like Fabinho. And if it's back to the 4-3-3, I'd argue where he came in is part of the reason the system fell down to an extent. Not when they were going for the quadruple, but last year when they were lacking the legs. Because when you think of Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum, that was legs on both sides, the intense pressing, that physicality. And Thiago is a different sort of player. Yes, he's very different to what else Liverpool have got, and that works for some games. But in other games, you need that energy. You need to be less pretty on the ball and let your better footballers around you, like the fullbacks and the forwards, do their business and let them just be effective. It basically depends on what Liverpool want to do next, whether they want a new midfielder and if they need to sacrifice someone to bring in a new midfielder. If he is here for another year, you're happy with that. But if there's an acceptance that he's probably going to go at the end of his contract, do you just take a hit and plan for the future? Get in a cash fee whilst you can, get him off the wage bill while you can, and then look further long term. It's what is the best decision for Liverpool in terms of phasing him out or keeping him as part of the team for this success this year, but going forward too.
There are 2 issues for me over this. I think I find it fascinating that it's become a very open debate this week. Losing Thiago. If you're having this conversation last week before Szoboszlai signs, and you're having the same conversation about losing Thiago, there'd be uproar.
Do you think so?
I think the signing Szoboszlai has opened the debate, and I just don't see. First of all, I don't think they'll get a good fee for him because he's 32, regardless of it being a Saudi club and maybe the premium that they pay because they're able to do it.
What do you define, as a good fee? What would you take for Thiago now?
It's pointless. The 20 is nothing, is it, for a club like Liverpool, really?
But if they got 20 and get his wages off the books, I mean, that goes a long way towards a Lavia, doesn't it?
Do you know what? I couldn't see Liverpool reinvesting it.
No,
I could see them taking a fee for Thiago and that being offset for the 95 million they've already spent. I just couldn't see them selling Thiago and then that is kind of freed up. Certainly wages-wise. I mean, they've already lost Oxlade-Chamberlain, Firmino, Milner and Keifer. That's close to £500,000 a week, based on what the estimates are.
I suppose it would be nice this year, wouldn't it? And I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, Gorsty, if they build on what they have rather than sell people and take people out the squad.
I just don't like this idea that Liverpool can only have 11 good players. I don't think I mentioned it.
No.
It's almost like as soon as Liverpool get a bit of depth to the squad, it's like, they've got to lose someone. Who's it going to be? It's no surprise that the strongest squad the Klopp has had almost won the quadruple in the second half of the season before last. And you need a big squad. How serious are they going to take the Europa League? They don't want to embarrass themselves in that and play too light a squad and get knocked out in stages or whatever. So for me, it's just a no-go selling Thiago.
So Thiago's staying to play in the Europa League with the kids.
I was just going to say, I think last season Liverpool played 50-odd games. If Liverpool get it right next season, they'll want to be playing 63, 64. I think obviously be 2 more, won't it? Be 65 if they go all the way in all the competitions again.
Say that, Keifer. But I didn't have to.
That's a hell of a lot of games, and you think of the turnaround with the Thursday, Sundays, which will obviously be quite frequent depending on how far they go in Europe. As Theo says, then okay, you might laugh at it now to playing with the kids in the Europa League, but when you're thinking, February, March time, especially if Liverpool don't top the group and you play that playoff round, it's if you can slot Thiago in, away from home on a Thursday night and you've got Brighton away on the Sunday, it makes a big difference. You look at last season when Liverpool were down to their bare bones in midfield, and it's fine now because he was a kind of a sink or swim situation, and ultimately he did swim. But you throw in Bajcetic in there, who had hardly kicked a ball for the academy for the previous season because he'd been injured, and there's a lot of pressure on him. And like I say, ultimately, Liverpool found a gem in that time of need, but there's a lot of pressure for a 19-year-old or 18-year-old, whatever he was at the time, to kind of stand tall. And when Liverpool were probably the worst they had been in Jurgen Klopp's kind of 7 full seasons there, so it's not a bad thing if he is going to be a Europa League player, because as you say, Liverpool need strength. And if you look at who they are going up against, I hate to bring Man City into this, but you look at Calvin Phillips last season. He hardly kicked a ball. I don't think he started a Premier League game. He's
getting an Amazon documentary, isn't he?
Oh, is he? Nice for him, but he started one game, and that's like 35 million, and it kind of just shows what you're up against in terms of squad depth and stuff. And as Gorst, he says, people are so quick to want to sell assets as soon as Liverpool strengthen. It was the same with Jota a few months ago. There was murmurs at Newcastle and stuff like that, and it's like, all right, he might be 4th choice or whatnot, but keep him around. Players get injured, not everyone stays fit, and before you know it, he'll probably have 30 games, 40 games by the end of the season.
It's worth saying on Thiago as well that he was their best midfielder along with Bajcetic before he got injured. When Fabinho was taken out the firing line, Henderson was taken out the firing line, he was the one who was playing every week, and he was consistent, and he maybe didn't get the praise you'd expect him to do when he's the top midfielder because of how poor Liverpool were at that time. Then he gets the injury and he's out for pretty much the season, and the frustrations are back going, he's injury prone, he's made of crisps, and it's like, Liverpool better without him when they change formation. How does he fit into that new formation? He's still a very talented player. It's just he's got this set role that is maybe a little bit different to the direction Liverpool took towards the final couple of months of the season. Like if you're grinding out a game, last year you bring on James Milner to see it out. This year you'd expect it to be Jordan Henderson. You're not necessarily throwing on Thiago to dive into challenges. but you do send him on to keep the ball, to take the sides that way. He does offer something a little bit different, but as I said before, you're thinking long term here. Do you want someone who's on big wages and you're probably only going to get fit for half a season to be that fringe player? Is that a luxury Liverpool can afford to have? And you have to take stock, as they're doing at the moment, seeing who else is available, seeing who else they want, and then see where he fits into it, or if he needs to be sacrificed, or if he is a player they can afford to have for another season as part of it, even if it's just for 30 games, and hopefully have an impact the same as he did in the quadruple year.
Yeah, well, a good squad helps a lot, doesn't it? And regular listeners to this pod will have heard me talk about Robbie Keane, time and time again. I always think that Liverpool selling him halfway through a season was one of the strangest decisions and potentially cost them the title. So I won't go through it again, but we will talk about Henderson and Fabinho, who I think, along with Thiago, I just wonder, the three, if you can briefly tell me, how do you think that all three of those players will fit in next season? Where do you think they'll play? What sort of position? How many games? That sort of thing.
I think Fabinho's the only one who's now a first choice, almost nailed on. I think Szoboszlai will play ahead of Henderson more often than not, you'd imagine. I'm not convinced that Fabinho's over the worst of the hump, if I'm honest. He was decent in the last sort of 10-11 games, but the 30 odd that preceded that, he was really struggling. So I hope I'm proven wrong on that, but I'm not convinced that he is back to what he was 3-4 years ago. So that's a big question mark for Liverpool's midfield this season, but certainly he's probably the one who's most likely to play out of those three more often than not next season.
Yeah, kind of the same. I think obviously Szoboszlai, we haven't seen him yet, and obviously he'll join up pre-season next week, but you'd expect him to take that kind of right centre midfield spot, and if Liverpool are going to kind of go with this thing of the two number 10s, he obviously suits that more than Henderson does. I think naturally, a lot of people probably expect Henderson to succeed the James Milner role, if you like, maybe do a bit of right back, maybe here and there. Again, probably still rack up 30 appearances over the course of, all four competitions, but, it'll probably be a drop off in minutes than he has done over the, probably his whole Liverpool career, to be fair. And Thiago, it's a difficult one with Thiago, isn't it? Because, as we've just said then, it depends kind of what he's viewed as internally. Do Liverpool want to, give those minutes to Curtis Jones after he's kind of kicked on last season? And the interesting thing now, we've not to take it away from Thiago, but with Curtis Jones, he'll miss a few weeks now because of the Euros, I imagine. So does that put Thiago ahead of him in the pecking order for the first couple of weeks of the season? And if he can stay fit, you'd imagine he'd probably be, as Theo says, if you need someone to come on 60 minutes and kind of break down a low block or something like that, you could maybe bring him on. But as Gorst says, I think Fabinho's the only one you look at now and think he gets into the Liverpool's strongest 11, and I don't think that's necessarily on his own merit. He was better when Trent was alongside him last season, but I think that's because Liverpool lacked the profile of like another, natural number 6, and obviously that's why the links of Lavia have kind of come out in the past couple of weeks, and so I think it'd be unfair to kind of label Bajcetic as a starter at this kind of age of his career. So I think Fabinho's the one kind of hanging on to that place, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're at Christmas and that landscape has completely changed, because Fabinho's got a lot to kind of prove, and what has he got now? 2 years left on his contract, I think, or 2, I think so.
2 years ago.
Yeah. So you're looking at if he doesn't pick up this season, there's probably a real and open, honest conversation next year of the Liverpool kind of part ways and move on with him. So I think it's a big season for him, probably the biggest out of in terms of, apart from the new signings, I think it's probably the biggest out of the old lot.
Yeah, I'd go along with what the other two have said there. Fabinho is the one at the moment who is the starter, but that's because they don't have a natural number 6 there to replace him. Like, if we're 2-3 years down the line, you may be looking at Bajcetic to come in, and he's the first choice.
I'm just thinking about that. Do you think Bajcetic is his... I see Bajcetic playing a little bit further forward. I don't see him being that sitter like Fabinho is.
It's one where we've got to see what role he develops into. Like, don't forget, when they signed him from Celta Vigo, he's a centre-back, and he didn't really play for the under-21s. He just went 18s, impressed in pre-season, was in the first team, and he didn't have much time as a number 6, but he can do the role. He had a few games as number 8 for that extra protection. But he's probably one of the players that suits the new formation. But you are looking at Fabinho and saying, what does he do next? Is it a case of he was knackered last year and he was performing poorly along with so many of his teammates, but in a better Liverpool team with legs around him, you get more of the best out of him? Like, if Trent can get into his new position and we see him have such an upturn in form, Fabinho did to an extent as well. So maybe there is life left in him. But if we're in September, October, and he's still below par, it's a gamble that hasn't paid off. And we've seen Liverpool take these gambles before, like not signing a centre-back to replace Dejan Lovren, or sticking with what they had midfield-wise last year. And we saw injury crises, and you're falling short there. There isn't that natural replacement for Fabinho. Henderson can do it, but he's not. There's question marks over him as well, which we will get to. He's fine as this bit part player, but it's still big question marks over Fabinho's head. But as Liverpool are doing at the moment, they're taking stock. They've signed 2 midfielders. They're weighing up what they want to do for a third. There's still, over a month until the season starts. You look at Fabinho in pre-season. You look at what he does in all their fitness tests. You look at what he does in the friendlies. He's not been away with Brazil, I don't think. So he's had the full summer break. He's going to be there on day one. And then you say, are you washed up here? Are you declining? Or can we look to get you back in that starting 11, back to your best? I always compare it to someone like Fernando Torres. There was such a shock when he went for 50 million. But the murmurs behind the scenes were Liverpool knew he was on the decline. They knew it was one injury too many and he was spent, and they were delighted to get that 50 million for him and sell him where they can. There are big question marks over Fabinho's head, but if he rises to it, he's still in that starting 11. And then Henderson takes the mill in a roll, comes on to see out games. Thiago comes on to control possession. You're happy for them being these backup roles for the squad, because really, if you look at McAllister being injured or Szoboszlai being injured, for me, at the moment, Curtis Jones is the one that comes in to start.
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy into this Fabinho is on the decline, he's on his way out type thing. We don't have those conversations. He wasn't the only one who had a bad season last year, and we don't have those conversations about Van Dijk. No one's talking about Van Dijk.
The thing I'd counter with that, sorry to interrupt, Joe, is I would say, I think Fabinho is a position where if he's off his game,
take that.
He makes Van Dijk worse, he makes Trent worse, because that protection.
But doesn't it work both ways?
Well, if you're looking at it from a defensive point of view, if the person in front of you isn't doing their job, you're going to face more shots, more tackles, more dribbles.
But we've seen in the past Van Dijk do some exceptional things and get Liverpool almost out of danger on his own. Is that, he's not doing that as much anymore. So Fabinho's, he's not infallible, as he's made mistakes in the past, and I think it would be interesting to see whether, with fresh legs around him, whether we start to see him play better and perhaps the spotlight not on him as much. Just the same for Van Dijk and others. So it should be an interesting one. We will talk Curtis Jones then. He was man of the match last night for England under-21s. We'll stay with you, Theo, because we know the 3 lions are on your chest. So
I'll say no, I didn't watch it. It's only on UEFA website, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you were there. Red
can
cross
see his massive
face.
bulldog tattoo.
yeah. But I mean, man of the match last night is really impressed in this tournament, and I know this will set the Twitter people off, but I mean, Liverpool linked with all these players at the under-21s. Curtis Jones has been playing every game, been playing really well. I mean, he obviously had a tremendous end to the season last year for Liverpool. Like you say, we're probably coming back a bit late. And I almost feel like people are counted him out a little bit. McAllister's come in, Szoboszlai's come in. What sort of role do you think he'll play for Liverpool next season? And is it make or break a little bit for him next year?
I think he's got a stay of execution almost for how well he's played these last few months. If he hadn't had that end of the season, you are saying this is make or break for him. But now we've seen the talent in there. He just needs to stay clear of the injuries, and they've said themselves, like Klopp and Jones himself, how much the injuries impacted him, how he couldn't train properly because they were doing the Champions League games in midweek, so he didn't get that full week in training, so they could get him back to his best. But then when he got that, we saw him flourish. He was as much of Trent key to the new formation working. And it's one where if McAllister or Szoboszlai take a little bit of time to settle, take a time to get used to the demands, he's the one you put in that starting 11, and you can do that left-sided role really well. It suits him really well. But as he's showing with England now, he can do this deeper role as well. He's gone viral a few times for some of the passes he's picking out.
A little no-look pass, didn't he?
Yeah, the no-look one yesterday.
Pointless skill in football. But
there was the amazing through ball he did basically from the halfway line in one of the group games, and he's just looking like a player who's confident. And when he's confident, nothing can touch him. He's just gliding through midfields. He's having more touches than any other player. He's playing more passes and completing more passes than any other player. More take-ons. You look at all the statistics here. I know that it's a bit boring for some when you have to break down his performances like that. But he is top of all the charts. And you think, well, this is what Klopp wants in his midfield.
If Liverpool was signing him from the under-21s, people would be raving, wouldn't they?
Yeah. If he was foreigner playing for Nice or something, costing 40-50 million, he'd be one of the ones who's top of the list. But he doesn't have that claim about him because he's been in a struggle in Liverpool midfield. He's from the academy, so you take him for granted. He's not had quite the rise of Trent, who just went from strength to strength. He's had a few knocks along the way, but most players have a few knocks along the way. It's only really, Michael Owen, you think of Premier League history, Robbie Fowler, that just got better and better and better rather than having to take time out. Like even Steven Gerrard, he had a few poor moments before he
and quite similar to
status.
Jones, he had those growing pains almost, if you like, didn't he? He had strange injuries when he was young.
But yeah, Jones, he is one to watch, isn't he? Like, it is tough for him in the sense of when he gets back for pre-season, we're on the eve of the campaign, the new signings have had time to settle, but he's still playing with confidence, and that's something we haven't seen from him for a couple of years now because of those injuries. And it's just one where he's been rated so highly, he's so versatile, he can do so much in that midfield. You can put him in the front three. Now we're seeing him play deeper. He is very much part of this midfield going forward. He's ahead of Elliott in the pecking order and all these other ones. He's ahead of Basetic in the pecking order. He is that proven one. He's in his he's coming towards his mid-20s. He's 22. He's not a kid anymore. And I know you say
you're aging him up.
I know you're saying it's make or break, but it's not make or break. It's now you are part of the first team. You're a first team midfield option. You're in the same bracket as Szoboszlai, as McAllister. Go and prove it. And what we've seen for the last 2-3 months, he is.
Yeah. Keifer, it wasn't that long ago he couldn't get in the squad. But what do you think? Is it a case of 11 performances yet, but they're 11 games, and perhaps we're getting overexcited about him, or do you think that he can kick on?
I think he can, and I think you only have to listen to the way he speaks. He's always believed in himself, and footballers are always going to back themselves, aren't they? But I think sometimes you can kind of see through those holes and maybe think, maybe he's putting on a front. But I think whenever he spoke to, Gorsty or Doyley in the mix zone this season, you always read what he says, and he speaks very well. But I think the biggest thing for him now is that I will say is I feel that there's a bit of clarity on his position. I felt like for a lot of years I didn't really know what he was. He was kind of, he was a left-sided midfielder, but you didn't know if he was going to drift into that attacking, kind of left-sided spaces or what he was. Was he a 10 playing as an 8? But see, now with England, he's playing in a double pivot with Angel Gomez, isn't he? And I think obviously England can get away with it because they're the best team in that tournament on paper by far. I mean, saw a stat this morning, that team cost 250 million in transfer fees, so there's probably no danger of them losing the ball. They can play out. They've got that bit of luxury. But I think even when you watch him towards the end of last season with Liverpool, you could kind of see what he was going for, and I think that helped his case because you could see that he was obviously targeting those back post runs. He scored the goal against Tottenham. The first against Leicester they were two very similar goals. But I think for so many years before that, people were just unsure of what Curtis Jones was, and maybe that's because he came through the academy as a bit of a flamboyant winger who, was obviously the best in his class. And I remember years ago when Gerrard was 18, he made a few comments about maybe him going back and that side of his game, whether he had that in his locker. But you say now he probably does both sides of the game equally as good as one another. So I think that's been a big bonus to him, and I think that's obviously bought him a bit of time. Now people can kind of buy into that vision of, maybe he might not be Thiago's long-term successor, but you can definitely see similarities between the two. Theo's talking about some of the passes that have gone viral during the tournament. They are very Thiago-esque in terms of, breaking lines and deep low blocks and stuff like that. So I do think it is a make or break year for him, because I think if he doesn't get the game time that he wants this year after breaking through last year at the end of the season and obviously having this tournament, he probably will maybe think, well, I'm going 24, maybe it's time for me to kind of get games under my belt. But I mean, he's played nearly 100 games for Liverpool in probably one of the best eras of all time. I mean, that's no mean feat. So I think people just need to, I think people maybe expect too much at times, and that's maybe I think he's been judged unfairly at times during, he's a Scouser, he's Liverpool, obviously obvious comparisons to Steven Gerrard, but I think obviously the development he's made over the last 5-6 months while being fit, I think it's only going to set him up for a really big season, hopefully.
It's a good point about saying he was top of the class. Like we've done between us a number of interviews with the younger players who've come through the academy ranks or have moved on, gone on out on loan or whatever, and all of them from that era say Curtis Jones was the best player by far. He was just naturally gifted, but he worked so hard to make sure he stayed at those levels as well. And you think of all the talented youngsters that have come through Liverpool ranks and had first team minutes, how many of them are actually stuck around in this Klopp era? It's just him and Trent. And Trent is a generational talent. No one can compare to him, the same as no one could compare to Gerrard 20 years ago. But for Jones to be that next one who's still a big part of the squad, played over 100 games, as Keifer's just said there, it's not like a Nico Williams or all the other fringe ones that come in, have a few games, and you're trying to sell them on for a profit. There is something there with the package of Jones from being part of the first team picture. He just needs to stay fit and get the games to actually showcase his ability. So hopefully he can push on from what we've seen. But he's always been highly rated.
I thought Keifer made a good point on the formation. Gorsty, do you think this formation has really helped Curtis Jones? Because, Leicester away, for example, him arriving late, scoring that goal, that is the player Liverpool fans want to see, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it's a decent sample size now. Curtis Jones played 11 games in a row towards the end of the season. It's a third of a season, pretty much, isn't it? Kind of come back into the team because Klopp was fuming with how everyone played against City in the game before when they got beat 4-1. But he's kind of built on a little bit of fortune there and really started to establish himself on the left of that midfield. And I think a thing that he's got going for him is he scores goals from that position. He scored 4 in 11, didn't he? Which is, I think maybe only Harvey Elliott scored more last season as a Liverpool midfielder. So that is something that bodes well because Liverpool don't typically tend to score too many from midfield.
And it's something they're looking for with Szoboszlai and McAllister, isn't it? So.
Yeah. So, I'm not as convinced that it's a make or break season, but just be nice to see him really build on the end of last season and the summer performances with the 21s with England and go from there. I don't think he's going to be a starter anywhere near as often as he was towards the back end of last season, but certainly a serious option for Liverpool with the Europa League and whatever else coming up.
We'll just talk quickly about Harvey Elliott. Gorsty, I'll stay with you. Because he's another player who just, like you said, scores goals. I think the new formation should suit him. But, make or break seems a bit much, but is it a big season for Harvey Elliott? He's played a lot more than Jones, hasn't he? He's been involved quite a bit, but I think his form has sort of come and gone a little bit. And with new players coming in, does he really need to stake a claim this year?
I think he was a little bit of a victim of circumstance, to be honest, last season with the general drop-off. Liverpool at their best, if they're capable of dropping in a young player like Elliott and an experienced player and he can learn his development in that team that's thriving and flourishing, then I don't think we're having this conversation. He's a really interesting player. I think he's a different type of option. I just don't think he needs to be playing 40 odd times like he did last season. I think it was only the Chelsea game in the start of April. It was the first game that he wasn't involved in all season. So that's probably too much for a 19-year-old at a club like Liverpool, especially when results have dipped and form's dropped off across the board. He was superb in some games. United at home, Tottenham away, off the top of my head, and he's a different type of option. Just maybe not. Maybe used a bit more sparingly. Maybe in a kind of opposite way to Thiago. Put him in at certain times, certain games, and then slowly but surely he'll build on what he's able to do. He's only 20, to be fair. He was only 20 in April, I think. So he's got years on his side to prove himself. And but I just think if the midfield isn't as reliant on him, I think maybe then we'll start to see, him start to fulfil his potential a bit more.
He's starting the Europa League games, isn't he? So he's going to get some starts, and he's still this alternative to Salah as well, which they're going to need at some point this season with the Cup of Nations. And as Gorsty said, he's 20, he's so young. Like, we've been having these conversations for Jones for 2-3 years now, and Elliott was ahead of him at that stage of his career. So it's one where you just give him a few games here and there, a few starts, squad appearances, learns his trade. He's very much part of the next generation. You think he's coming into his peak years as Henderson, Thiago and Fabinho take that next drop off. So yeah, he's definitely a talented player. All young players have those up and downs, and Liverpool get the best out of him at some point. It's just finding that top form again, which was a bit lacking. It's just as he dwindled a little bit in game time is when everyone else rose, and that's why maybe the questions are about him now. But even though he's not been a starter for England, we've all seen his goal against Germany. It was absolutely superb, running half the length of the pitch. He's another one. He's got that confidence about him, that aura about him, and if he's doing this at 20, you just want to see him develop a bit more and become that more of a senior option years down the line.
Be nice, Keifer. Sorry, go on. It would be nice to see him and see Liverpool be able to rotate a bit like Pep does. Not just in terms of personnel for different games, but in positions as well. Because Elliott's played, like you say, Salah replacement. He played out wide for Blackburn, didn't he, when he was on loan there?
Definitely, and I think it's also worth remembering that this is last season was his first full season as a Liverpool player. Obviously, he had that first year, but that was the COVID year, and he was kind of dropped in and out between the 21s as it was and the first team. Obviously, he went to Blackburn the year after, and then last season, obviously, got the injury at Leeds, didn't he? So he missed. I think he only played 2 times after that when he came back. So, for a first season, playing 45, 50 games, however many he played for Liverpool last season, again, is no mean feat. And I think as we talk now, there's a difference in kind of churning out games. He's gone through that part. We know he's durable. He doesn't really pick up many injuries. I think now will be, as Gorsty says, you're looking to maybe aid his development and think maybe looking at the fixtures and thinking what are the nice games we can drop him into and where he can kind of really sparkle. But I mean, you look at Liverpool's best performances at home last season, and he was kind of a permanent fixture in the midfield for all of them. You've got City back in October. You've got United the 7-0. Tottenham, I think he started the 4-3 as well. Don't think he started the Arsenal game, but if you're looking at the 3 or 4 big home games last season, he was on the right hand side of midfield all throughout. So I think that obviously is a testament to kind of what Klopp thinks of him, but also his maturity to kind of handle those big games and big occasions. Yeah. All right,
Gorsty. Well, the Reds return to training on Saturday, and it'll be the first day where they do all the tests, and you see them all hooked up to the treadmills and all that. Is it the lactate test? Is it on Saturday?
Yeah, it normally is. Yeah, day one.
James Milner used to be the king of the lactate test, didn't he? No one could touch him. Who do you think was it Trent that came second last year, or perhaps even challenged him?
I'm not
Who do you think
sure.
be challenged him?
I don't think they did it traditionally last year. They did it a bit differently because of how it was like a short summer break, wasn't it? Because of how late the summer break started for him, and then with the World Cup and everything. It's
certainly the day when Andreas Kohlmeier earns his money, isn't it? The famed Taskmaster.
Must be the day they dread.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like yesteryear where they like goes by Ibiza and drink 20 pints a day all summer, and then just
that's just Gorsty.
Have to lose 2 stone.
I mean they keep themselves in great nick anyway in the close season, don't they, nowadays? Speaking to Matt Kopeniski, who used to work for Liverpool a couple of weeks back, and he was saying how the pre-season schedule now is totally different for a modern professional, and he was actually with Adam Lallana in Portugal at the time, and he was doing some end of season training. Seen Mo Salah keeping himself in good nick, hasn't he?
Seen his abs? He's got a gap between his abs. Theo can fit in there. It's unbelievable.
And Henderson as well, he's put something on social media this season. So they keep themselves in great nick, don't they? They're not going to be showing up, blowing for tugs and whatever else. But Andy Robertson tells a great story, doesn't he, about pre-season training at Liverpool when it was a real eye-opener for him, and he ended up actually throwing up on the side of the pitch because of how much he was getting put through the ringer. So, it must be the day they all hate. But with Milner gone, the throne is vacant for the king of the lactate tests.
Yeah, really, I'm actually quite excited to see who it will be. That Szoboszlai looks like a big lad, looks very strapping.
I fancy Joe Gomez. I think he's pushed him close, hasn't it? And you see that the clips in yesteryear, he's not winning it, but he's going the distance, and he's going to be one who's had the full summer break. He's not at internationals. He's there day one. Maybe it's Joe Gomez's time to shine.
I'm pretty sure Trent's up there as well. Obviously pre-season is big for them this year. Klopp's spoken last year about it not being a very good pre-season for them, Keifer. So this is key, isn't it? This is where he gets his work done, and this is where Liverpool will have the majority of players coming back. Obviously, the under-21s delays a few, but they'll be pretty happy with the squad they get back Saturday, won't they? But they're not moving around this year as well, as it's one place, because I think last year was Singapore and Kuala Lumpur.
Thailand and Singapore, yeah.
So, and that would have been for a lot of players, I imagine, there would have been 2 or 3 years without doing that, so that would have been a shock to the system, going to a far-flung location like that. And obviously you can imagine it makes a difference, because Klopp is a man who's very set and firm in his ways, isn't he, of what he believes. So, if they can kind of lay the foundations this week, starting with Saturday, and then they get a few more back kind of coming through the doors in the days and weeks ahead, It should set them up quite nicely, and I think as well the season starts a week later this year, doesn't it? I think it was a
it's just like a mid-August, like traditional, isn't it now? Right? Instead of the early
I think
August.
Fulham last year was the 7th
or September.
It was 6th or 7th of August, I think, last year. So that gives them another week in the tank, and obviously key as well is that the gap between the end of last season and the start of the new season isn't as short as what the turnaround was last year. So I think on paper it should be, a really good kind of 5 or 6 week period for Liverpool.
I think it's interesting that Klopp's taken the decision to go to the kind of European-based camp first before the commercial-driven jaunt.
It's usually the other way around, isn't it?
It's usually the other way around, yeah, because just looking at the injuries Liverpool picked up last season in pre-season and the early Premier League season, it was Oxlade-Chamberlain, Jota, Konate, Henderson, Thiago, Keifer, Joel Matip. And I think
really bad, isn't it, if you think about it? I hadn't really got my head around that, but that is really bad, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's why Klopp has almost pulled rank this time and said, look, now we're going to Germany first, building up the reserves of fitness, we're having double sessions and everyone's getting as fit as a fiddle. And then when we go to Thailand, we can then do what we need to do here and there, commercially wise, and get out of there. Because I think he was really kind of burnt by that decision last season. So, we very rarely kind of says, this is my decision and this is what goes when it comes to that sort of stuff. But very much seems like this decision has been taken by Klopp to say, look, this is not happening again.
Okay, we'll finish off the pod by having a bit of a natter about Liverpool's rivals, what they're doing in the transfer market. Theo, this is your time to shine, I think. Too few people. United complete the sign of Mason Mount this week, obviously a player Liverpool looked at. It feels like now it's all said and done. Obviously, Liverpool went and got Szoboszlai in that sort of cloak and dagger deal. But 60 million for Mount, wages of around 240,000 a week, we think.
250, I think, around there.
It feels like Liverpool have got the better deal there, doesn't it? I know Szoboszlai's going to have to settle. I know we know slightly less about him. But, I mean, what are your feelings there on that deal with United? Do you feel like Liverpool are quite happy?
I wouldn't look at it as in they've just got Szoboszlai against Mount. You throw in McAllister there as well, like it's 30 million more when you look at the combined two. But it's two midfielders that Liverpool brought in very quickly. They avoided a saga, and they were players that wanted to join Liverpool. They wanted to play for Jurgen Klopp. Some of the quotes from Szoboszlai this week, I think Gorst turned them around, about he's happy to sacrifice a year in the Champions League. It's like, oh, I'll just go and win the Europa League then. It's like, yes, that's what we want to hear, Dom. A great attitude. But you compare that to Mason Mount, where you don't want to come out and say he's gone for the money or he's gone for the Champions League football. But it seems Champions League football was crucial to his decision, and that is a big wage. Like, he's on more than McAllister and Szoboszlai combined, I believe. If he'd had those at Liverpool, only Salah would have earned more than him. And Liverpool have had to take stock on what's more important to them. They didn't want a drawn-out saga. They brought in two players before Mount was even through the door at Manchester United. Liverpool can be happy with their decision. They decided to step away a while ago, and it's not as though Manchester United beat them to the signing of Mason Mount. They just had other ideas. And you look back to some of the quotes from Klopp over the years. I think back to the 2016 ones that I wrote about yesterday. I'd have put down the phone on them. I wouldn't be interested if they're saying, oh yeah, I'll join if you're in the Champions League. Only, I think, Mario Götze maybe is one of the few players to turn down Liverpool because they're not in the Champions League. All the other signings, it hasn't mattered to them. Like, they got Gini Wijnaldum when they weren't in the Champions League. They got Sadio Mane when they weren't in the Champions League. And they are getting Liverpool, what's this saying? Getting the train moving again. Push the train. Push the train. That is what McAllister and Szoboszlai will be doing.
What trains does Klopp get on, by the way, that people need to push them?
You have to get a good ticket there.
I hope he's not paying for his ticket. Pushing it as well.
So yeah, like, players that fit into what Klopp wants, that is what he's got. And maybe, reading between the lines, Mason Mount wasn't quite buying into that, but Liverpool made their decision long ago. Yeah,
we had a little chat about this the other day, Keifer, but I think it's quite interesting. Lots been made of United and Ten Hag's revolution, and I'm just not buying in. I feel like they've been so poor in recent seasons that a slightly above average season last year, and it's like, right, they're back. Mason Mount, they're looking for a new goalkeeper. Where do you stand on them? Do you think they're going to be? Do you think Liverpool can get back ahead of them? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that I kind of noticed about United the other day is it feels like there's a saga hanging over them with De Gea, which it might not seem, to kind of people on the outside, they might think, well, he's however old he is and he's past it, he's been past it for a few years. But if you actually read into it a bit in terms of, like, there's been contracts on the table that he's signed and then they've been pulled away. I just think all of that it leaves quite a musty feel about the place in terms of, who's holding rank here, who's offering the contract, who's pulling it away, what kind of message does that send to the rest of the squad?
It's not quite a ruthless, a lot's been made of Ten Hag's ruthless decisions, but it doesn't feel like a ruthless one. It feels like they're almost looking for another goalkeeper, but keeping him on the back burner.
And the way he kind of handled the Ronaldo saga, to be fair to him, I thought he did that really well earlier last season.
I've got a theory about that, though. I don't think he had any say in that.
Do you know?
No. I mean, leaving out the team is obviously his choice, but once Ronaldo gave that interview to Piers Morgan,
100%.
the decision to get rid of him was above Ten Hag's pay grade.
There was a pre-season game where Ronaldo left, and I think after that, Ten Hag had kind of had enough. But in terms of kind of, getting stuck into the job, I thought he did quite well. There was the whole thing made after they lost to Brentford where he did the running with the players as well and buying into the culture, whatever people made of that. But I feel like you say, Joe, a lot has been made, he's quite ruthless, but as you say with De Gea, it's kind of like, well, they're looking at Onana, they're looking at this lad from Brighton as well, but they're kind of keeping De Gea on the side and talking to him. And I think if that kind of seeps into pre-season as, where do you stand with all that, it's, that's a spine. We know, as Liverpool fans, we know how important it is to have a good goalkeeper. It's the difference between coming first and coming second and winning trophies. And I just think if they're heading into pre-season with, not sure who they're having, who they're getting. Obviously, Mount's a great signing for them. They've obviously definitely overpaid. But if you're handing him £250,000 a week straight off the bat, that in itself sends a dangerous message, I think. I mean, a lot was made of it, last year with Salah when he had his contract, but you think that was 5 years of service at the elite level.
Absolutely,
and he deserved every single penny of it. And even when Salah first came to Liverpool, he had a contract extension within 12 months, and that's kind of how Liverpool do their business. It's like, right, you start on the base pay of, in the excess of 100, then you might go to 200, and then, you kind of get your big pay like Salah has. I think Mount was, I think I've read something, he was on 70 at Chelsea, 60, 70, to go from that to 250 at, a place like United where there is egos and
cheaper accommodation too. He'll get his money here.
Yeah, exactly.
But that feels like almost a type of mistake that they've made before, and that Liverpool, much to the angst of some fans on social media, refuse to make. Liverpool just don't do that sort of thing. They don't hand out big contracts. Look how long it took them to agree a contract with Salah for 5 years.
Dean Henderson's probably on the same wage that McAllister's coming in at.
Yeah.
It is crazy, and I'm not even sure they really need Mason Mount. They need a number 9.
I mean, I think they're trying to refresh the midfield, aren't they? But I feel like I'm happier with where Liverpool are at than where United are at.
I think, to be fair, I was saying to Theo yesterday, for large parts of this year, I thought Mason Mount was going to end up at Liverpool. And then, I think early May was kind of, when everyone maybe realised that he was probably heading to United. But look at it 6-7 weeks later, and Liverpool, ended up with Alexis McAllister, World Cup winner. He's played over around about 100 Premier League games, which is a good number, a good sample size. Then you look at Dominic Szoboszlai, maybe a bit of an unknown quantity, but he's, where he's impressed where he's been, and I think you can kind of see what Liverpool are getting at with him. And it's not as if Liverpool, yes, they would like him to hit the ground running straight away, but they're not absolutely dependent on it. If someone like Mount, who's probably played close to 200 Premier League games, obviously you're paying for that in itself. You're paying for the homegrown, issue, which Liverpool probably could have done with, let's be fair. But it is an enormous kind of fee for someone who I'm not really sure where his best position is. And in terms of United's makeup of their midfield long term, I'm not really sure how he fits into. I think he would have been a better fit for Liverpool. I think if I was him, and obviously maybe I've got my red tinted glasses on, but I think Liverpool would have been a perfect destination for him. But I think at United there's an ability maybe to get lost there. He's not going to be the creative outlet. You've got Bruno. He's not going to be the box to box really if they have a McTominay or someone like that. So I just don't really see how that kind of functions. But obviously I'm not the man paid the big bucks to deal with that kind of issue.
Let's extend that to Liverpool's other rivals, Gorsty. And I'm going to ask you to do this quickly before we finish off. But who worries you? Who doesn't? And rank them.
Well,
I'm taking Man City out of it because obviously Man City.
I was just going to say, but Man City worry me just because of how capable they are of replacing big names.
But Man City are up here, aren't they?
Yeah.
Gundogan's
gone and Kovacic will come in and probably just be twice as good as them. It's just the way they work.
It feels like the pack underneath Man City could shuffle, and that's where Liverpool could come in.
Yeah, I mean Arsenal clearly show an intent to continue the trajectory, aren't they, with Havertz and Jurriën Timber and of course Declan Rice. They're all very good signings, but they're not don't think any of them would make me think, oh, I'm really hugely concerned about them. But I do think they will be up there again next season. I think Tottenham, really difficult summer for them. If they lose Harry Kane, I think they might almost just fall by the wayside and finish 7th or 8th next season.
7th or 8th would be good.
That's what they did this year, wasn't it?
I think
Newcastle,
they could be finishing
not
bottom half if they lose Kane.
I'm
still
not
got 30 goals, didn't they?
Going to be as good as they were last season. I still think they probably need to improve the squad personnel-wise. I think they've had a lot of players playing out of the skin. You know, the likes of Dan Burns, Sean Longstaff, they're not major players who other teams in the Champions League are going to be worried about, are they, with respect to them? But we know that they've got the finances to do it. But generally, you know, Liverpool will get the house in order. They shouldn't be scared of anyone.
The 2 signings Liverpool have made, and if they get people back fit, Keifer.
Yeah.
I
think you only need to look at the reaction to the Szoboszlai signing, and obviously complemented that with McAllister a few weeks before. I think the kind of wider reaction from, you know, away from Liverpool, I think was one of, as Gorst says, you know, if Liverpool kind of get themselves in check this season, I think everyone realised that the second half of last season, certainly the final third, that Liverpool probably down tools within themselves. They weren't playing, you know, anywhere close they were, and, you know, so many players were kind of out of form and not interested. But, you know, I said it earlier in the season that I think, you know, if you'd gone from competing for the Premier League and the Champions League to then kind of be in a top 4, top 5 battle, would have been a reality check, and there would have been a few bruised egos there. But I think if Liverpool can get themselves, you know, back to where they were, and then you throw the 2 lads in there, which should have been last summer, I think Liverpool will be there or thereabouts again. I think Arsenal obviously are the ones who are spending the big money at the moment, but I mean, I really like Declan Rice. I think he's a fantastic player, but he's not a winner yet, is he? I know he won the Conference League, but he's not someone who's going to... I mean, he could make the difference for them, but he's not got that proven...
The next step is always the hardest step, isn't it?
I think Timber as well was he 22, 20, whatever.
It could come crashing down for him.
Yeah, so, you know, he's another player who's probably a bit of an unknown. You know, what you're going to get there. Did I miss a joke there?
Did you not get it?
I didn't hear what you said.
No, I'm not going to repeat it.
And then obviously, I think Chelsea, a lot has been made of their kind of the way they've sold in the market so far. A lot of that has also been to the Saudi Pro League, but I think a lot of people need to realise that's only to break even from what they've already spent. So I don't think Chelsea will be too busy between now and the end of the window. I mean, they could be, but it feels very much like they're trying to make up for what they did last year. Apart from that, I think Liverpool will be, if they can get their own house in check, I think they'll be there or thereabouts again.
We'll let you have the final word, Theo, and make it a good one. Who are you worried about? Who are you not worried about?
Liverpool finished in the top 3 with Arsenal. Arsenal have signed well. Kai Havertz never felt like a good fit at Chelsea. I know he scored the goal that wins in the Champions League, but they were like playing him out of position all the time. I think with Arteta, that's a good manager who can get the best out of him. Declan Rice is a very good signing. He's an upgrade on the players they had before, like Xhaka, who's an upgrade on Jorginho. That is a huge signing for them. It could make a difference. That keeps them in title contention rather than just 1 year, then you drop off.
Do you know what it is for them as well? I think it's a statement, isn't it? You know, they've got him ahead of City. He only really seems to want to go to Arsenal. Big fee. It's, you know, shows that they're acting. They're serious.
It's like Liverpool a few years ago when they had their big statement signings, went on big spending spree, going big in the Champions League. Arsenal and Liverpool should be the sides that are pushing City most next year as it stands. Chelsea are a mess. Don't think as it stands you can really fear them. Newcastle, I agree with what Gorst said.
Is Pochettino not the most important signing for Chelsea? Do you not think that
did he win at Tottenham?
No, he's a top manager.
He organised them, didn't he?
He'll organise them, he'll make them better, but he can't help if the manager's going to go and play, if the chairman's going to play football manager and sign whoever he wants and say, we've got to sell this player, this player,
James
this player.
Gordon.
Yeah. So it's just a mess behind the scenes at Chelsea compared to the stability they had under Roman Abramovich. As Gorst said with Newcastle, some players are really good. Like Isaac looks like he'll step on again. Wilson's just had the season of his life. Tonani looks a good signing. They've got Guimaraes. But then they've got some players there you'd just expect to be mid-table Premier League who are playing out their skins. If they get top 4, they've done well, but they'll have Champions League distractions. United, I think they've sort of deceived people here. Like, they think they'll turn that corner because Liverpool, Spurs and Chelsea was so poor last year. If they're on their game, they're not in the top 4.
It says a lot, doesn't it, that Liverpool had the worst season for the past, well, certainly since Klopp was there, since Rodgers, and I'm really nearly snuck into the Champions League.
Only missed out in the final week of the season, by the way.
And it was if they'd got maximum points, they'd have finished level with Newcastle, but it's just because, we've conceded defeat here, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then Newcastle knew they'd done it, so they dropped points anyway. And then finally on Tottenham, they've made a mess here with Harry Kane if they're going to lose him. Like, Liverpool knew they were going to lose Sadio Mane months in advance. So what did? They brought in Diaz in the January, got Nunes in the summer, had it done well before pre-season started, and then had Mane gone in the middle of June. If you're losing Harry Kane now when pre-season's just about to start, you don't have a clue you're going to get in to replace him. The only signing you've made who's permanent so far is Kulusevski, who was with you on loan for the past 18 months. He's been there for 3 years. Yeah, he was 18 months loan.
I think Maddison's a good signing, to be fair. I think he's one. They've probably got a bit
cheap. He's not going to replace Harry Kane's goals, though, is he?
For Tottenham, they should have been succession planning for Kane for years because he's been threatening to leave every summer. Yeah.
So if they were going to lose him, they needed to be ready for it in June before the season starts, so they could get the replacements, move first, go and get a striker before anyone else does. They've left it late on, trying to hold on to him, and it's just going to back him into a corner, and they'll have another poor season. Like, how much do we really expect the manager to make a difference? I know he's highly rated. He's done really well at Celtic, but Steven Gerrard was really highly rated at Rangers, and he struggled at Villa. It doesn't mean he's going to make that immediate step up. And Tottenham have been a mess from manager to manager behind the scenes for so long now. I've got to replace Doyley here as the Tottenham manager, don't I? But Pochettino is the only manager who's actually been a success for them for 15 years. As long as Keifer can remember. In Keifer's lifetime, Pochettino's the only good manager they've had.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, we will leave it there mercilessly for Tottenham fans.
That's
thanks
all
for listening.
From the Anti-Spurs pod.
Yeah. It's Blood Red podcast. The blood is Spurs blood. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it from Lovelock's Coffee Shop in Liverpool. Let us know what you thought. Give us a tweet. Drop us an email. Joe.Rimmer at reachplc.com. Let us know what you thought. Drop a message on YouTube, and we'll be back on Monday to talk the start of pre-season and plenty more besides. See you then. Ta-ra.
You've been listening to the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.